right, we are here at the George Mason University Dance Department with Judge Dan Joyce with his reviews of Mad Lib's music.
Hi everybody, nice to be back in the Young Artist Showcase world again. I just want to make a few remarks to everybody before I get started, and then I'll go individually into each of the pieces that I watched for the Mad Libs Challenge. I just want to say thank you. Being a generative artist, I think, is a very courageous thing to do, to create something and to put it out for the rest of the world to see. I think takes a lot of bravery, and especially then to ask people for critical feedback about it. I think it takes a lot of courage to do that. So I'm very much appreciative of everybody's efforts in this. Choreography is really something that takes a lot of practice and a lot of skill and a lot of doing it wrong before you kind of get to that aha moment where something magical really happens. But it's situations like this, I think, where you get to practice this and exercise your imagination and to have inspirations given to you that you might not have thought of yourself. Those kind of tests will help you to be even more creative in the future and in your future choreography careers, I believe. This particular challenge, I think, is so great because actually what I think you've been asked to do is to take imagery and then to make movement out of that. And this is something that we do in contemporary dance really all of the time. This reminds me of one of the great sort of mothers of modern dance in the 20th century was a lady named Hanya Holm, who was originally from Germany. And she said that you should always start with the image and with the sort of the image that you're trying to create, and let that lead you into then creating the steps rather than doing steps that then you're going to try to graft some meaning on top of. So I think this was a really, really great challenge. You've kind of been given archetypal, almost cliched scenarios. And then the trick is to then make that unique, even though it is a situation that we are familiar with. Last thing too, that we do this a lot in dance also, that we want to make the movement as important as the music. So this is a very good litmus test, I think, for other pieces that you may do in the future that are inspired by music. After you've created that, then take the music out and see if it works as well without the music. Can you really let the movement do the talking and then add music back into it? So I think this was a particularly good challenge for everybody, and certainly lots of fun for me to look at. Okay, going into each one of the pieces, starting with Allison and the Dance Crew Battle. And I'm going to say a few things probably in relation to everybody, although I will talk individually, but some of these things I think are applicable to all of the pieces, or to many of them. I thought this was a very clear setup from the beginning. The attitude of the ladies was very clear in their body language and in their movement. I really got the idea of anything you can do, I can do better, sort of setup that you had going on. I wish that it had taken a little more time to develop and that it was a little longer and more detailed. Maybe more individual movement for each person, and I found this with several of the trios that often it would be one person and then the two in unison, and I think more interesting, especially with 3 people or 5 people or whatever, that we give them individual movement to do rather than unison movement to do so much. So in this case, I wish that there had been more for each person, and that there had been more developed, complicated relationships between the 3 of them, although it was very clear. And I rated that at 2 stars. Moving on to Katie and her playing outside, I thought it was a very good opening, very clever how you used your environment of looking out the window and then sort of testing the waters to see if you could go outside, and then you did. Lots of really, really nice movement and a really lovely performance, I thought. I appreciated the transition between the sort of smaller, slower movement into the sort of bigger, faster, exuberant movement, which I thought made for a nice dynamic change, which we like in works of art. I did feel like it could have used a more concise or a more conclusive ending. It just sort of seemed to be over, and I felt like we needed some resolution, and I sort of felt like that with a number of the pieces. So remember, sort of like we think in literature or in theater about exposition and conflict, and then some kind of resolution. I thought there were some great details in this piece. I especially loved when you stepped in the dog poo. I thought that was just a great sort of little detail to add, and I think that'd be something I would say to everybody when you're doing these sort of archetypal stories like boy meets girl or whatever, that you still can find details. That's what makes things interesting, or in the details, I believe. I didn't understand some of the gestures. I thought maybe that could have been explored a little bit more. But I thought this was certainly a nice piece. I rated it with 3 stars. Kate and the Mosh Pit. I just thought, when I read that description initially, I thought, well, mosh pits are kind of wild and almost out of control and sort of bacchanalian, if you will. So I thought that was a particularly difficult one, I thought. Again, I'm going to say I thought it would have been stronger to me if the ladies hadn't have had so much unison. I think actually a mosh pit situation, part of that is that everybody is on their own. And so it sort of makes me wonder, like, well, why are the ladies doing exactly the same thing at the same time? Which actually humans don't really do all that much. So I wish there had been more individual movement rather than unison movement. It also felt a little bit short to me. Again, I wish that there had been more details in the actions. So it seemed just a little too concise. The story, I think, could have been a little bit more complicated. Really nice energy from the skaters. Also, I thought the trio material could have been developed more. In dance, a lot of times we say that odd numbers are always more interesting than even numbers. I'm not exactly sure why. But it just, because there is an odd number rather than a duple number, I think that forces us a lot of times to do something a little more out of the box in terms of the interrelationships with the 3 of them. I also thought there could have been more movement material for the gentleman also. And I rated that at 2 stars. Anna and her offbeat romance I thought was very cute. I especially liked the mirroring section. There was beautiful edging in that. Again, I'm going to say I thought it could have used more character details that happened in the motion. And you remember, you want to try to use the skating rather than the acting, or find a way to blend them. I sort of felt like the static in one spot close-ups of the facial expressions, for me, could have been choreographically stronger, and I wish that they had been in motion rather than still. It kind of felt like a pretty traditional ice dance couple piece for me. I would have gone with the quirky a little bit more, which was sort of one of the buzzwords for about this. I thought it needed a little more quirk to it, in my opinion. And just in general, I'd say stick with the skating, or make the acting come out of the skating. And I also rated that at 2 stars. Brianna and the Cuban Bar. I liked the initial setup. It was very clear from the beginning. I liked how you transitioned into the second girl. I wondered why the first girl left, and that's a good choreographic question to ask ourselves too, is when we start making entrances and exits, to say, why are they entering or why are they exiting? And you'll often find that they don't need to exit, even if they're not necessarily doing something. A lot of really good energy with some nice choreographic details. Really good variety of action, I'm going to say, in that trio. You transferred the Latin dance to the ice pretty well, which I think is difficult. Again, I'm going to say a lot of unison between the 2. Could it have been more individual movement for everybody? You used the skaters really well. I would also say, could we develop the trio material more? And have more interaction between the 3 of them. I didn't quite get the ending, really. I mean, it was cute, but I thought the ending wasn't quite as strong as the rest of the setup. I actually gave this 4 stars because I thought overall it really expressed the challenge concisely and was clear, and also had a lot of variety. I felt like this was something I could see in a show, and I would believe it. It would seem a little more professional choreography to me. So I rated that at 4 stars. Mauro and the Epic Love Story, some original and interesting movement. Certainly well skated, I thought. Uses a lot of space with great energy. I got the beginning, middle, and end very clearly. Delivered nice emotion, although I have to say once it kind of started, I wasn't so sure that it was Epic Love Story was the emotion that I was getting, but I was getting one, so that's good. I suppose that opening gesture really set us up for it, so I wondered if the opening gesture couldn't have come back into the choreography later or been developed been developed a little bit more. And I rated that at 3.5 stars. Heidi and Mardi Gras, again, sort of like Mosh Pit, I sort of feel like, okay, here's the license to steal, Mardi Gras. And even though I have not yet been to Mardi Gras myself, my understanding is it's a little raunchy. And while I'm not advocating for overt, gratuitous vulgarity, I just felt like that part of it was missing. I kind of got most happy fella, but I didn't really get why. Maybe he needed some Mardi Gras beads or something. So I kind of missed the Bacchanalian, again, Dionysian sort of feel of Mardi Gras. Lots of variety of movement. It was really performed well. Again, I think it needs, think of what are the details that I can put into this that will make it resonant. And I rated that at 2.5 stars. Okay, and then coming to conclusion with Sarah and the Misty Rain. Very nicely performed, I thought, very sort of genuine. The umbrella image was very clear to me. I don't know if props would or would not have been allowed in this, but I almost thought perhaps we could even have an actual umbrella, but I got the umbrella very clearly. It answers the challenge really well, but I could use some more originality and choreographic detail. So I could see Girl out in the misty rain, it made sense. But even in that scenario, I feel like something else could also happen. Also that one kind of ran on a little bit, and we want to remember sometimes the power of the pause, and that stopping and restarting can be okay too. And I rated that one at 2 stars. So for everybody, please keep doing what you're doing. Choreography is something that takes a lot of practice, and it's very frustrating, and you want to, I'm sure, kick the ice and kick your skaters, but don't. But do keep after this. It's a very noble pursuit, I believe, to be creative. And for everybody, just think maybe a little less, even though this was a pretty literal challenge with the archetypal imagery that you had, maybe think a little more abstract rather than literal. And if you're going for literal, then how can I make that unusual and individual? So, because that's what's interesting to us, the viewer, the unique individual rather than just sort of the literal thing. Humans love exaggeration, and they love unique details and things. So I guess that'd be my big message to everybody. But I'm really in your corner. Thanks a lot for doing this. Thanks to Audrey and her crew, and really looking forward to seeing the rest of your pieces and your continued careers. So thanks very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Dan.